So we're going to start with just a reminder about the slope formula. You have used it many times now, so it's not something new and unusual. Sometimes people still make the mistake of getting the top and the bottom mixed up. So it comes from when you have 2 points. We call this x1 and y1. Another point, x2 and y2. And the formula, m is equal to the second y minus the first y divided by the second x minus the first x. You can even have the switch and do y1 minus y2 as long as you're consistent and do x1 minus x2 at the bottom. The problem here is simply that people tend to get these mixed up and put the x's on top and the y's on the bottom. So remind yourself not to do that. If you keep the y's on top and the x's on bottom, you have a much better chance of getting it right. So just watch for that. Okay, so as an example for one, let's do 5, negative 3, and 7 and 12. So the slope for that would be 12 minus a negative 3. And that's where you have to be careful of those negatives, because that means on the top of it, 12 take away 3, these negatives become a positive, so you get a 15. And then 7 minus 5, so it's y minus y and x minus x being consistent. 7 minus 5 is 2. Okay. This is a slope. That means if you were doing on a graph, this would be the rise, how far up you're going, and this would be the run, how far over you're going. Okay? If that was a 16 or a 14, I would just divide it and make it 8 or 7, but it's not. So you could make a fraction out of this, well, it is a fraction. You could make a decimal out of this because it's an ending decimal. That would be 7.5. So 7.5 would be an acceptable answer, or 15 over 2, but not 7.5. Do not do mixed numbers for a slope, because then it's no longer a rise over a run. So I absolutely insist and make a big deal of the fact that you cannot do this if it's a slope. Other times use fractions, fine, but not for a slope. Never do that for a slope. Okay? I've got a few little pet peeves. That's one of my new pet peeves. So watch out for that. Okay, now vertical and horizontal lines, people tend to make some errors on just simply getting mixed up on. And I want to do a little hand graph here. And let's go over to negative 3 on the x-axis. So go to negative 3 and draw a line up. And let's put a point at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here, this is negative 3 and positive 5. So that's that point. And we're going to come down a couple to here. I'm going to draw a line this way. So follow along. This is at negative 2. So that point is negative 3 and negative 2. And then I'm going to go out here to 1, 2, 3, 4. That point is at 4 and negative 2. So let me make this a little larger so you can replicate that on your paper. So there's the x-axis and y-axis, and then I'm going negative 3, 5, negative 3, 2, and vertical line, negative 3, negative 2, and 4, negative 2 for a horizontal line. So once you get caught up with that, then we'll determine these slopes for these, because there's a big difference between what you do when you get zeros, and I want to make sure that you see it. Okay, so I am going to take this line first. This is a horizontal line, and I have 2 points, negative 3, negative 2, and 4, negative 2. So what I'm going to do, the slope is going to be a y minus the other y over x minus the other x. So notice I did negative 2 minus a negative 2, or that's going to be plus 2. And I did 4 minus a negative 3, so it's going to be plus 3. So negative 2 plus 2 is 0, and 4 plus 3 is 7. 0 divided by anything is 0. So 0 over 7 is not a correct answer. That's like doing 4 over 2. You have to reduce that to 2. 0 over 7 is equal to 0, and so that would be the slope. The slope is 0. Whoops, I did it that way you can see it. The slope is 0 if you have 0 on top and you're doing 0 divided by some number. Okay, so don't do that, do that. Okay? And this would lose you a point because you're not reduced it. You have not reduced it. Okay, so I'll warn you right now to watch for that. Now let's look at the other one. Okay, and I'm going to use the points. I'll write them here to make it easier to see. -3, 5, and -3, -2. And so now I'm going to do the same thing. M is equal to, now it's -2 minus 5, and now it's -3, bless you, minus a -3. So on the top we get a -7, and on the bottom that becomes plus. -3 plus 3 is 0. That's not 0. That looks like a 0 and is a 0, but this answer is not 0. Because you can't divide by 0. No one has ever figured out how to divide by 0. If you ever do, you'll be the greatest mathematician in the 21st or 22nd century for the next hundreds of years. No one's ever figured it out. No one can do it. There's no way around it. It just doesn't exist. It is not equal to 0. If you give 0 for an answer to that, you are wrong, and I will mark it as wrong. The only answer when you divide by 0 is undefined. It is an undefined slope. It doesn't exist, it's not possible, but don't say those. I want the word undefined. That's the word you're using this year. You're going to use that word next year whenever you divide by 0. You're going to use that the year after in grade 3 and in pre-calculus and anything else you do in math. When you have a dividing by 0 situation, undefined is the thing to say. I won't take points off if you say not possible, but I'll say undefined instead. Okay? So, as long as the one thing you can't do is don't make it equal to 0. Don't get something like this and then on the answer put a 0. Okay? Because I will mark it wrong. It's like just not possible. You just cannot do it. It's not equal to 0. So don't get these mixed up. Now that tells you something. Every horizontal line, no matter where they are, as long as they're horizontal, you're going to have 0 on the top because we're going to do y minus y. If it's up here, you're going to do 3 minus 3, whatever they might be. So horizontal lines always have a slope of 0. Vertical lines, the x's are the same for any points. So any vertical line is always having a slope of undefined, every single time. Because the x's will always subtract each other and you'll end up getting 0 on the bottom for any vertical lines. So you can flat out memorize that, or you can use this to try the slope and figure it out like this. But then recognize that if you have 0 and you're dividing by something else, then it's 0. But if you're dividing by 0, it's undefined. That's the only acceptable answer. So I want to get that out of the way, because every year when I have problems come up, for this is on the test, about half the people do this and put a 0 for that. And I don't want you to do that. Okay? So keep that in mind. This is a big, big deal. I can warn you right now that you want to know this for the test in 3 weeks. Okay? So right now is one of those things to remind yourself about before we do that test. Okay, now down here, we're going to write slope-intercept form equation given 2 points. You've done this before. I don't know why this textbook has chapter 11 similar to some of the ones before, but it doesn't hurt to go over again. So every year I go over it again because this is like, of all the things in Integrated 1, doing slope-intercept form in various ways, some of the things we're doing too, is like the single biggest topic. Graphing them is next, and then there's a couple other things. There's about 5 or 6 ultra important topics that without them you shouldn't be passing the class. This is like number 1. So it's not going to hurt to go over it again. And if you know it really well from before and now too, then that'll be all the better when you get the test in 3 weeks. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 points. 4, 9, -2, and 0. We want to write the slope-intercept form equation. There's a couple of ways to do this, but I'm going to show you one of them now. Okay, so the slope-intercept form equation is supposed to look like y equals mx plus b. There's the slope, and it has the place where it hits the y-axis. So the first thing is let's find the slope, the m. M is equal to y minus y and x minus x. So if this is the second pair, I'll do y2, 0, minus the 9, and underneath I'll do -2 minus 4. So I did y minus y and x minus x. That gives me a negative 9 here and a negative 6 there. The negatives cancel out, and when I divide top and bottom by the number 3, 9 divided by 3 is 2, and, 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So I have a slope of 3 over 10. Okay. This is where you can't make it 1/2, 1 and 1/2, because it's a slope. You could do 1.5 if you prefer, and some people prefer decimals. Go ahead if you want to put 1.5. I'm going to leave it 3 over 2 because I just like to do it that way. At that point, it becomes preference. 3 over 2 x plus b, or y equals 1.5 x plus b. You'll get the right answer both days, so I'm fine. I don't care which way, as long as you don't do 1 and 1/2. Now, we need to find the b. And that's where you can pick either one of these, use one of these two things to go in here as the y and the x. So I can put 4 and 9 and put 9 here and 4 here, or I can use the negative 2, 0, 0 here and negative 2 here. So I'm going to, 0, that seems easy, it's got the negative, but I'm going to use this one just, that's more normal that we'd have one that doesn't have a 0, so I'm going to use 4 and 9. So 9 is equal to 3 over 2, 4 plus b. 2 goes into 2 once and 4 twice. So that's 9 is equal to 6 plus b. Let's subtract the 6 on both sides, so b is equal to a 3. 9 take away 6. So that's the place where, if we graph this, where we cross the y-axis. Now we put it back into the equation to get our full final answer. That's the slope-intercept form, because it's in the form of y equals the slope times x plus the y-intercept, where it hits the y-axis. Okay? So that satisfies this. So you've done it before. I'm going to warn you, you're going to do it again. So just make sure you're ready for 2 points. You find the slope first, then you put the slope in for the m, and you pick either one of the points to solve for b. If I had done negative 2 and 0, I would have gotten the same answer. Maybe I still would have gotten a 3. So it's entirely your choice which one of the points to do. Okay. I'm going to give you these 2 points, but I'm not going to do these right now. I want to say that on your own, you're welcome to do this sort of as practice and see that you can do it yourself. And on Friday, when I post this in Google Classroom, I'll have this worked out so you can see if you were right. You don't have to do it, you're not required, but it's a good practice one, since I'm pretty much telling you you're going to do this on the test. So do that if you want to as a practice. Okay, now 11.3 and 11.4, page 2. So let's go to page 2. So what we're going to do now is do slope as a rate of change. Get this where I usually can't move so much. So what we're going to do here is find slope again, but we're going to talk about it. Notice it says here interpret. Okay, so it means we're going to have to write about and explain what it means. So let's look at this situation. You're traveling 1,200 miles on 40 gallons of gas. Relate the number of miles traveled to the amount of gas. Well, what we do here is we find what the unit rate would be. Think about what's happening is 1,200 miles over 40 gallons of gas. I'll just put GAL. We want to know how much for, say, 1 gallon. So basically we reduce it. We just do some reducing. The zeros cancel out, and 4 goes into 120 equals 30 over 1 miles over gallon. We don't write things that way. We write it as 30 miles per gallon, because we don't really need the 1 anymore. That's the way you'd write it. Or you'd say 30 miles per gallon, 30 miles for 1 gallon. Okay, so all you do is you divide it by dividing and then simplifying it. That gets you the unit rate. If you can get the bottom one to be a 1, then this is the unit rate, 30 for 1. Okay, so you see how to do that? That's pretty easy math to do with a calculator, or just cross it out. You can see what we're having. This one's important. Interpret. Write what the slope means and normal English sentences. Normal English words. Put it in words. In other words, put it in words. I'm going to have to say English because I don't want anybody writing Italian or another language I don't know. So please don't. I can worry some words out in Spanish and French because I've taken those before, but it's been way too long. So please keep to English. So that means to just simply take that and write it. So that means you travel 30 miles for each gallon of gas, or for each. That sounds good enough. I'm not really picky on how you say it. You could say 30 miles on 1 gallon of gas, or for every gallon of gas you go 30 miles. That would do it too. In other words, what makes sense? Write it so it's reasonable and it makes sense. So it's not hard to do, you just have to remember to do it. Okay, interpret means to write it in words. And you'll see that on the test. When you see it says interpret, write it out. Actually say it in words. I want you to say it like this. If you say it like that or something similar that makes sense, you get credit. If you forget and you try to do something with the numbers like that, like I've seen, well, then you won't get credit. So this is more a matter of just remember what I'm saying. Whatever that means to write it out. So on the bottom, it's the same kind of thing. In fact, they'll start this. Let's do it as, think about it, because this one comes out to a fraction. I meant that to be as practice, so actually, but let's do it and think of it as a fraction. 6 bags, 8 weeks. If you have pets, you know that they tend to actually eat, so you actually have to get them food. So, and hopefully they'll change their habits where you have to buy more all the time. We have 2 cats and 2 guinea pigs at our house. And unfortunately, the guinea pigs don't end up as food for the cats. I'm not the guinea pig lover at our house. But we have to buy food for both of them. And so that's why I like this, this kind of problem. But here, one of the issues is we've got to figure out, we've got an 8 here, and it's 6 bags in every 8 weeks. Well, how much for 1 week? A unit rate is where you get it down to 1 week. So the way you do that is you just simply divide. In this case, we're going to end up with a decimal or a fraction like that. If I reduce it right now, I get 3 over 4, because 6 bags in 8 weeks is 3 bags in 4 weeks. If I want to reduce it more, just divide it. 3 goes into 4, and you get a 0.75. So it's 0.75 over 1. So if I do 3 divided by 4, I'm really having 0.75 over 1. So it's 0.7, so it's 0.75 bags per week, or you could say 3/4 of a bag per week. So both of those would be mathematically correct and both make sense. Okay? Interpret means to say this in words. So in 1 week, the cats eat 3/4 of a bag of cat food, or 0.75 of a bag. I could accept 0.75. I think 3/4 makes sense, but that's good enough. The numbers don't have to be like written as 3-quarters. You can write 3 over 4, and that's good. But the rest of the sentence has to be a normal sentence. In our house, that's up and down, depending upon how much tuna or other things that my daughter decides to feed our cats. It might be less or more than the 3/4. Usually less, because she likes to overfeed them. I like the cats too, so I don't mind that so much. Guinea pigs are another matter, but I like the cats. Okay, so you got the idea here. You see, interpret, you can write it out. And even if it comes out to a fraction and a decimal, that's per 1 week. The goal is to get it per 1 gallon, per 1 week, or in a different situation, figure out what that 1 would be. So put that aside, and there's a part 3 here. Okay, now this is the same kind of thing. We're going to work with finding slope, but now we're going to work with finding them based on parallel or perpendicular lines. So first, a reminder to this part. I'm going to tell you that these two are parallel. So you need to remember that the slopes are same if parallel. So the slopes are the same if they're parallel lines. And that's one way you can tell that they're parallel lines. If you have y equals 2x plus something and another one that's y equals 2x plus something different, the twos are the same, the slopes are the same. That means those two lines are parallel. Now, over here, let's do a line like this and a line like this. And I tried to make it look parallel, but by doing this, I can force it into the issue. If there's a 90-degree angle, then the lines are perpendicular. So now I shouldn't say parallel, I should say perpendicular. Perpendicular lines have a 90-degree angle, and that means that their slopes are completely opposite. Slopes are opposite, reciprocal. Opposite reciprocals. So let's say that the slope of one of them, m equals 5. If one of them, the slope is 5, the other one is going to be a negative, because that's a positive, so that has to be a negative. You take the 5 and you switch the fractions. Remember, that's 5 over 1. That means it's 1 over 5. If you were given this one, slope is negative 1/5, you take away the negative and you flip the fraction, so you'd end up with a 5. So remember that. That one's important. We're going to do it a couple of times. Let's do it by graphing. For this one, put a point at y is at -3. And then that's going to be, let's see, I have a slope of 1. Okay. And the next point, put it there. So this point is 0, -3. And that point is at -1, -1. And notice what I'm doing is going up 2 and over 1, 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 up 2 and over 1. You get the idea. So for this one, the slope was up 2, positive, but then this way -1. So the slope is -2. Now, put one here at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put a point at 5, and then do the same 2 and 1, or go the other way, go down 2 and over 1 that way, and draw that one. Now, that slope has the same, because if you do that counting, and you purposely did that, you get the same m equals -2. The equation, since we know we cross here at -3, this one is y equals -2x plus 3, because that number is simply where did you hit the y-axis rather. We know the slope, we know where it hit the y-axis. Whoops, I put plus, it's supposed to be minus. Here it's plus. Y equals -2x plus 5. But what I want to emphasize here is the slopes are the same. If the places it hits the y-axis are different, then you have the parallel lines. If it's the same, then it's actually the same line on top of itself. Over here, let's do a perpendicular line. So this one here, I'm going to use the same one. Not the second, but the first one. So let's go to -3 and -1, -1. That means we crossed also here. Now, having done those, let's see. Now, put a point at, get the right one, yeah, this is it. Put a point at 0 and 2. Got to get this exactly right. Put a point at 0 and 2. Now, this slope, the m we see is already up 2 and over 1 the negative way, so it's -2. this one, we go up 1 and over 2. So here, for this line, the slope is 1/2. So m equals 1/2, m equals -2. That one there, this one here. This slope and this slope, look at them, and you see that the signs are different, and 2 and 1/2 are reciprocals. If the slopes are opposite sign and reciprocals, that means that these two are definitely perpendicular, and then you can do this and say 90-degree angle and show it that way. I didn't have that at first because I wanted to show that if you have the slopes like this, that proves that it is perpendicular, and you don't even need the right angle, but now you can put it because you've just proven it. Okay. Now, what we're going to do, this is the graphing, how they look. Now we're going to move to the equations of them. Make an equation of a line parallel to y equals 2x minus 85. That goes through -4, -6. Yeah, that works. It's supposed to be a 4, really. -4. -4, -6. Now there, that's better. Okay. Parallel lines. If they're parallel, the slopes are the same. So if we want to make the equation, when it says make an equation, it doesn't say whether it should be standard form, point slope form, or slope intercept form. Just do slope intercept form. That's almost always the one to go. Unless you're told different, just do slope intercept form. So slope intercept form is supposed to be y equals mx plus b, but we already know the m. We already know the slope because it's parallel to that line. So we already know it's y equals 2x plus b. We just figure out what b is. Okay? So this -85 just means nothing. If I'd had more space, I actually would have made it like 852,000 or something, just to show that it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter. What mattered is that if it's parallel, the slope is what you need. You need the 2. We use this point to help us get it. So you remember on the first page of this, if you had 2 points, you could find the slope and then use either one of the points to help you with the slope and that point. You could then find out what the y-intercept is. We're doing the same thing here. It's just, in this case, 2 points gave you the slope. In this problem, the parallel line gave you the slope. So it's just a different way of getting the slope. Getting the y-intercept is the same way. You have 1 point only, so you don't have to choose. Plug that point in here, and -6 for the y equals 2 times -4 for the x plus b. And now we can figure out what b is. So -6 equals -8 plus b. Let's add the 8 on both sides. So we get 2 equals b. Oh, so we have another 2. So we get y equals the 2x. And now we know the y-intercept is a positive 2. So once again, finding the y-intercept by plugging in the point is what we do, except we just found the slope in a different way. This next problem, we're going to do the same. We're going to find the slope in a different way. Okay? Make equation of a line perpendicular to y equals, oh, guess what? I'm going to use the same thing. 2x minus 85, and we're going to use, the same exact points. Because it's perfectly fine to use the same exact points. But now, in this case, these were 2 lines that were parallel. Now, this line and the line we're going to make are going to be lines that are perpendicular. And if they're going to be perpendicular, that means we take that slope and we don't use 2. Well, I guess we use it, but we change it. We have to change it by doing those 2 things. Change the sign. So since that's positive, we're going to use a negative, and make it the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 2 is 1/2. So the slope is -1/2. We still want to use the same slope-intercept form, so I'll put the -1/2 in here. And we're still, just like here, we're going to plug the -4 and -6 in, except when we did it before, we were using 2 as a slope. Now we're using -1/2. So -6 equals -1/2 negative 4 plus b. I'll make this a little larger to make sure you see it. 2 goes into 4 twice, so I have negative 1 times negative 2. That looks like 2. It looks like 2 because it is 2. So we got a positive 2 there. And I subtract the 2 from both sides, so b is equal to negative 8. Now I know the y-intercept. And over here I'll put, since I know the slope is negative 1/2 and I know the y-intercept is negative 8, I can do y equals negative 1/2 x minus 8. And I've just made the equation for the perpendicular line to this line. So from sections 11.3 and 11.4, you're going to need to make sure you can do the things on these 3 pages. You have to be able to identify vertical and horizontal lines and identify their slopes in case you happen to see one. You have to be able to use 2 points to make the slope-intercept form. You're going to have to be able to take this, I guess I need to go over about writing an equation. But you're going to have to be able to identify essentially the slope of this and interpret it. And we practiced one here. And you're going to have to be able to determine from a parallel line or a perpendicular line what the slope is, and then find the y-intercept in order to make the equations. Go back for a second to page 2, and I forgot to actually say write an equation here. So write an equation, we'd have y equals mx plus b. But in this kind of a problem, the y-intercept isn't really necessary. So we're really just looking for y equals mx or y equals kx. You sometimes see it, I forget what way the book does it. So once you find the slope, you say it's y equals 30x. So really just once you find this and divide it, the unit rate is the slope. Unit rate is just the reduced version. So I'll put that. Down here, we got either 0.75 or 3/4. 0.75 is a better one here on this one for that. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to say y equals 0.75x. I guess it would be perfectly fine to say 3/4x because we don't usually make the one make this less than 1 if it's a decimal or go down to it. This is a case where it's good to do it. I want you to do it. So actually the best answer would be this one. So make sure you're comfortable with doing all of these, or come in and see me if you need help. Practice them and make sure you know them, because there's about 6 or 7 test questions out of those pages that you need to make sure you're comfortable with being able to do each of those things. Okay.